Before I tell you how I was scammed out of my home, shoved into a shed, and handed a list of rules like I was a damn tenant instead of family, let me back up and start with the truth. I loved my brother more than life. I raised him. I fed him, clothed him, paid for his braces, wiped his tears, and cheered at his graduation when no one else showed up. So when he came to me after my husband died, all smiles, big dreams, and promises of room 217, in a beautiful beach house we'd all share, I believed him. I believed him enough to sell my house and hand over nearly every cent I had left. Because family, right? What I got in return wasn't a room. It wasn't even a bed. It was betrayal. But what Caleb and his wife didn't count on. I'm not some fragile old woman who fades quietly into the background. No, I faded into the shadows, and from there I watched. I listened. I waited. And then I got to work. When people say grief is a slow ache, they never mention how it hums like a low engine in your bones. It never turns off, not even for sleep. That's how it was after Martin died. My husband of 41 years. Gone in an instant. No drawn-out illness. No goodbye. Just a Tuesday morning heart attack while watering the azaleas. I found him on the mulch, face down, the hose still running like it hadn't noticed the change in the world. That was 11 months ago. And in that time, I learned that the kind of silence that fills a house after a death isn't peaceful. It's interrogating. Every creak asks a question you don't want to answer. Every shadow looks too full. The refrigerator hum turns into a sermon about loneliness. The walls? They listen, but they never speak back. Martin and I never had children. It wasn't for lack of trying, but life had other plans. I had one miscarriage in '85 that nearly tore me apart, and after that we just let go. We poured our love into each other and into our home. A modest colonial outside Savannah, with peeling paint and a stubborn front gate that Martin never got around to fixing, though he swore he would. Every year. Next spring, he'd say. And every spring came and went. But I had Caleb, my younger brother by 9 years. I was only 18 when our parents were killed in a wreck outside Charleston. Drunk driver, foggy night, 2 lives gone in a snap. Caleb was 9, barely tall enough to ride a roller coaster, suddenly thrust into the tail end of my girlhood. I was legally old enough to take guardianship, and stubborn enough to say yes when everyone else thought I should say no. I became more mother than sister. Packed his lunches, signed his field trip slips, drove him to basketball tryouts, held him when he cried after his first heartbreak, and clapped the loudest when he crossed the stage at graduation. People used to think he was mine. In every way that mattered, he was. He used to call me Lou. Not Lucille. Not Lucy. Just Lou, slurred like a secret or a song. There was love in it. But now? Now it's Lucille. Clipped. Flat. The way a nurse calls a patient's name in a waiting room. He came by unannounced one Sunday, just under a month after Martin's funeral. I was still sleeping in Martin's old flannel shirts, still eating microwave dinners because the kitchen made too much noise when I used it alone. He brought Becca, his wife, with him, wearing linen and lip gloss and a smile that felt like a salesman's handshake. They brought croissants. Store-bought. No card. Lucille, he said, we've got something we want to show you. They opened a tablet and pulled up a listing: beachfront property in Seabright Bay. Stucco house, white trim, navy blue shutters, a porch swing just waiting for some magazine cover to notice it. 5 bedrooms, he said. Ocean view. Big backyard, room for a garden. And get this. He looked at Becca, who smiled like a kid showing off her science fair project. There's a whole upstairs suite. Like its own apartment. Room 217. Room 217? I asked. That's what it says on the listing, Becca said. We thought it'd be perfect for you. It's got its own bathroom, a little kitchenette, balcony overlooking the dunes. Your own space. It wouldn't be home without you, Caleb added, reaching over to squeeze my hand. We'll live downstairs. You'll have your privacy, but we'll be together. Like family's supposed to be. My throat tightened. I looked around my living room. It hadn't changed since Martin passed. His slippers still sat by the recliner. His reading glasses on the end table. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum I was too polite to leave. Becca touched my arm. Her perfume was floral, expensive, and cloying. We just want to start a new chapter. Together. But to make it happen, we need to move quickly. The sellers are getting other offers. That was the first red flag. But grief does strange things to your gut instincts. It muffles them. I nodded. How would it work? I asked. Well, Caleb began, if you sold this house, your part of the equity could help with the down payment. We'd handle the mortgage. Your room is yours forever. No rent, no nonsense. Just family. They didn't ask outright for a dollar amount. They didn't have to. Caleb knew how much Martin and I had saved. Knew the house was paid off. Knew I had nobody else. I should have asked more questions. I should have insisted on paperwork. But in that moment I was tired of eating alone. Tired of silence. Tired of being a ghost in a house we'd built together. I said yes. They left that day smiling. Becca hugged me. Caleb kissed my cheek. You won't regret this, Lou, he whispered. That night I poured a glass of wine, the first since Martin passed, and toasted to room 217. To new beginnings. To family. A week later I started packing. I signed the papers on a rainy Thursday. The lawyer's office was uptown, tucked inside a beige building that smelled like carpet cleaner and printer ink. I wore Martin's old trench coat, the one with the loose button and the faint smell of cedar. Caleb offered to drive me, said Becca had a spa appointment. He kept the music low. Talked about escrow and inspections and how fast beachfront properties were flying off the market. He made it sound urgent. Like we were lucky to get in when we did. Like I needed to move quickly or risk being left behind. I should have noticed the way he always said we when the money was mine and you when it came to packing up the house. At the law office they had one of those plastic trays full of cheap pens. Caleb picked one up and handed it to me like it was a ritual. The forms were thick, double-sided, single-spaced. I don't think I read more than a paragraph. The lawyer was a friend of Caleb's. Young, polite, with a tie too tight around the neck and a voice full of legalese. I remember nodding a lot. Smiling when I didn't understand something. That awful automatic kind of smile women are trained to wear when they're outnumbered. The sale of my house went through in under 2 weeks. I'd owned that place for over 30 years. Martin and I had remodeled it together. Took down walls, redid the floors, planted the garden from scratch. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. And now it belonged to a stranger with an offer just a few thousand over asking price. Caleb had suggested I move in temporarily with him and Becca until the beach house was ready. I declined. Instead, I stayed at a little extended stay suite near the highway, across from a Waffle House and a discount furniture store. I told myself it was just for a few nights. Just until room 217 was ready. Just until the paint dried. They sent me photos of the new place. A swing on the porch. Becca's caption said, "Can't wait to see you out here with your coffee." There was a picture of a staircase with a skylight. Caleb called it, "Your route to the clouds." Another showed the backyard garden bed, empty and waiting. He wrote, "You'll work your magic here, Lou. Just like the old place." And then came the big one. A photo of a small hallway, pale blue walls, a white door with a brushed nickel number plaque nailed above the frame. Room 217. Just like they promised. That night I stared at that photo for a long time. It didn't look like much. A blank hallway. A door. But I'd made my decision based on that promise. That one room, my own space, my own privacy, still close to the only family I had. I sent them $280,000. That was the number Caleb had estimated would cover my share. The deposit, renovations for the suite, and a little cushion for incidentals. I wired it through the bank myself. The teller called me ma'am, and double-checked the amount twice. I remember feeling light afterward, nervous but hopeful, like I was finally stepping into a chapter that didn't begin with grief. Later that week, I asked if they'd added my name to the deed. Seemed reasonable. After all, I was investing almost everything I had. Caleb smiled, that same disarming, lazy smile he's had since childhood, and said, "We talked to the tax guy, Lou. It's cleaner if we keep it under one name. Less risk. If your name's on it, it could mess with your Medicare stuff. You don't want that kind of headache." I hesitated. "You trust me, right?" he added. I nodded. Because I did. Or I thought I did. And besides, I was tired. I'd spent weeks sleeping in a bed that wasn't mine, eating takeout in plastic containers, folding my clothes into little piles on a chair because there was no dresser. All I wanted was to be done with it. To be somewhere that felt like mine. Becca sent a text with a champagne emoji. We're almost there. Movers are booked, and your room is freshly painted. Just bring yourself in that sweet smile of yours. On move-in day, Caleb and Becca insisted I ride with them instead of following in my own car. Less hassle, Becca said, tossing my suitcase into the back like she was checking me into a resort. I remember the way the wind felt on my face when we crossed the Seabright Bridge. Salty, brisk, full of something that felt like possibility. I thought, this is it. This is home. When we pulled into the driveway, the house was even bigger in person. Cream-colored siding, dark slate roof, porch wide enough to fit a dozen rocking chairs. My chest lifted with something like relief. Becca took a selfie of the three of us on the porch. Caleb grinned with his arms slung around me. I smiled too and meant it, but that would be the last smile I gave them for a long time. Inside, the house smelled like new paint and lemon cleaner. Hardwood floors, tall ceilings, windows so clean you couldn't tell they had glass. Caleb gave me the grand tour. Kitchen with marble counters. Open concept living room. Spa-like bathroom according to Becca. And then he said it. Let's show you your space. We walked through the kitchen, past the mudroom, out a back door. That's when I saw it. A small detached building behind the house, low, square, painted the same color as the main house but older, like someone had tried to make it match. No steps. No balcony. No windows that I could see. That's the guest suite, Becca chirped. We thought it made more sense than having you upstairs. More private. Less noise. I blinked at it. Room 217 was not upstairs. It was not a room with a view. It was a converted shed. They didn't ask how I felt. They didn't pause. Caleb just handed me a key and a folded sheet of paper titled, House Guidelines. It was typed. Numbered. 12 rules. I hadn't even opened the door yet. My hand tightened around the key. I didn't say a word. Not yet. It took me 7 seconds to realize the truth. From the moment Caleb opened that creaking door to the backyard suite, I knew room 217, the room with the balcony, the kitchenette, the ocean view, didn't exist. It never had. What I stepped into wasn't a suite. It was a storage shed. A converted one, sure, but barely. Rough concrete floor. A single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The kind that buzzes like a fly trapped in a jar. The walls had been painted a bland off-white, but it didn't hide the water stains in the corners or the long crack that ran along the back panel like a scar. There was a twin bed shoved into the far corner. Not a real bed. A cot really, with a foam mattress wrapped in a thrift store comforter that smelled like someone else's detergent. No headboard, no dresser, no closet. Just a folding table acting as a nightstand and one single outlet on the opposite wall, already taken by a cheap lamp with a fraying cord. No windows. No bathroom. No balcony. I stood there in the doorway, holding the key in my hand like I might need it to stab something. Caleb stood behind me. See? Cozy, right? His voice was light, casual, like he hadn't just handed me the worst downgrade of my life. Becca appeared at his side with a smile tight as a screw. We figured this would be easier for everyone. You've got your own space and we can keep things running in the main house. The plumbing isn't ready in here yet, but you can come inside to shower and use the facilities. Just not too late, the kids are light sleepers. She handed me the typed list again. You'll want to read this. We printed a copy for your room too. I unfolded the page. House guidelines for guest use. No kitchen access after 7 p.m. No guests allowed without approval. Use back in trance only. Laundry is permitted on Sundays only, 1 load. Quiet hours start at 8 p.m. Do not rearrange items in the main house. No use of upstairs bathrooms. Replenish any food used from pantry. Stay out of the garage-sensitive equipment. No candles, incense, or heating pads. Lock your unit when leaving. Respect shared space as a guest in our home. At the bottom in smaller font. We reserve the right to update rules as needed. Guest. The word stung more than I expected. It was official. I wasn't family here. I wasn't even a roommate. I was a guest. In a shed. I looked up. Becca was still smiling, but her eyes were scanning the inside of the shed like she couldn't wait to get away from the smell. Caleb wasn't even looking at me anymore. He was fiddling with the outdoor faucet, testing the hose pressure. Where's the kitchenette? I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Becca blinked. We figured that little table could be your prep station. We left a mini fridge in there and a hot plate. It's safer this way. Less crowding in the main kitchen. Oh, and there's a camping toilet in the corner cabinet if it's too late to come inside. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I stepped inside the shed, feeling the temperature drop by 5 degrees. It was damp, the kind of chill that clings to your socks and your bones. I put my suitcase on the cot, and it took up half the mattress. There was no space for a chair. No space for anything. When I turned around, they were already walking back to the house. That night I unpacked 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, and my toothbrush. I laid my late husband's shaving kit on the tiny table like an offering. I plugged in the lamp and tried to make the place feel less like a holding cell, and more like something I could tolerate. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, opened the guidelines and read them again. They didn't even bother to write thank you at the bottom. I didn't sleep much. Around midnight, I walked barefoot across the lawn to the back door. I needed the bathroom. The house was dark except for the glow of a TV in the upstairs master. I knocked lightly. No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. When I finally got Becca on the phone, "Yes, phone," she answered with a huff. "Lucille, it's after midnight. Can't this wait?" "I need the bathroom," I said. Silence. Then, "All right, hang on." The door opened 2 minutes later. She didn't say a word as I passed her. The bathroom was fine. Not exceptional. Just clean. But it might as well have been made of gold. The way she hovered near the hallway, arms crossed, like she expected me to steal the toilet paper. When I walked back outside, she said, "Let's try to stick to the agreed-upon hours. The kids have a schedule." I didn't answer. The next morning I came inside to make toast. It was 7:03 a.m. I hadn't had coffee. Becca was already at the kitchen table, sipping from a pastel mug that said #MomLife. "Good morning," I said. She didn't look up. I took a slice of bread, dropped it in the toaster. The click echoed like a gunshot. "You used the wrong mug yesterday," she said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" "The floral one in the corner cabinet? That's decorative. Please stick to the plain white mugs in the rack." I stared at her for a full 10 seconds. Then I turned back to the toaster. The rest of the day I kept to the shed. I read from an old gardening magazine. Took notes on what I'd plant if they ever let me near that bare patch of dirt outside. I called the post office to see if I could forward my mail somewhere that wasn't technically an address. "You can't forward to a detached structure without a verified unit number," the clerk said. I hung up. No address. No mailbox. No room 217. Just me. In a box with a lock. That night I wrote something in my notebook. Not a journal. A record. Day 1. Promised suite. Delivered shed. No access. No privacy. No ownership. I closed the book and turned off the lamp. And in the dark I made a decision. I would not ask again. I would watch. And when the time came, I would make them regret every lie. The first time I tried to talk to Caleb about the shed, he was on the deck, drinking coffee like a man who believed his world was untouchable. He sat in one of those overpriced Adirondack chairs, legs crossed, scrolling his phone with one hand and stirring sugar into his cup with the other. I stood beside him for nearly 30 seconds before he looked up. "What's up, Lucille?" he asked, not Lou. Not even hey. Just my name like it belonged to a stranger. "I need to talk about the room," I said. He leaned back, tilted his head, feigned confusion. "What room?" "Room 217. He paused. Just for a second. A flicker in his eyes that told me he remembered the promise. The upstairs suite. The balcony. The lies. But he covered it quick. "Oh, that," he said, waving it off. "Look, the upstairs space wasn't feasible. Plumbing issues. Insulation. You wouldn't have been comfortable there." "And the shed is?" "Lucille." He exhaled, set the cup down. "It's temporary. Just until we figure things out. You're not paying rent, remember?" That last line hit harder than I expected. Not paying rent. As if my $280,000 had evaporated into a courtesy. As if I'd become some freeloading aunt they were gracious enough to keep in the yard. "It's not about the rent," I said quietly. "It's about being lied to." He stood up. Towered over me like he used to when he was 15 and full of teenage anger. Don't make this harder than it has to be, all right? We're doing our best here. Then he walked past me down the steps, out into the garden I was never invited to touch. I didn't follow. I didn't speak to Becca directly for 5 days after that. When she finally did show up at the shed, she didn't knock. She just opened the door and walked in, holding a box of scented drawer liners and a Target bag filled with plastic hangers. Figured you'd want to get more settled, she said, setting the items down on my only table. I stared at her. I'm not staying long. She smiled, tilted her head like she was talking to a difficult child. It's a big adjustment. You'll feel better once you find your rhythm. Some gratitude wouldn't kill you either. She left before I could answer. I didn't put the drawer liners in. I didn't touch the hangers. I left them on the table like offerings I refused to accept. From that day forward I stopped asking. I started observing. I paid attention to when Caleb left for work, when he returned, what hours Becca was out running errands. I listened to the kids' routines, when the dishwasher ran, when the laundry cycled, when the lights upstairs went off. I memorized the schedule of their lives so I could stay invisible. Not for them. For me. If I couldn't be part of the house, I would study it. Every crack in their foundation. Every sloppily kept secret. I started keeping a log. I wrote everything in a small black notebook I bought at a gas station. Times. Patterns. Conversations. Not just to have it, but because I knew somewhere deep in my bones that this story wouldn't end with me quietly fading in a guest shed. They weren't careful. Becca especially. She talked on speakerphone. She gossiped loudly on the patio. I overheard her say she was glad we didn't put her name on the deed, because who knows how long she'll be around. She laughed after that, one of those fake breathy laughs that sounds like a balloon slowly leaking. Caleb barely looked at me anymore. If we crossed paths, he nodded, distracted, already halfway into some meeting or some call. He never asked how I was doing. He never offered to walk through the garden with me. He never mentioned room 217 again. The only time they needed me was when Becca's mom came to visit. Suddenly, I was ushered into the house like a beloved relative. This is Lucille, Caleb's amazing sister. She's staying with us for a bit while the cottage is remodeled. Cottage. They had renamed the shed. Played my part. I smiled. I sat stiffly on their Pottery Barn love seat and drank tea from the plain white mug. I answered questions like I hadn't been sleeping with a flashlight and using the house bathroom like a criminal. And when Becca's mom left, I was ushered right back out. It wasn't just emotional exile. It was physical. The door to the main house was now locked after 8 p.m. Caleb said it was for security. The laundry privileges became conditional. Maybe every other Sunday instead of weekly. The hot plate in my shed was taken out after the outlet shorted, though I suspected they just got tired of the smell. I asked for a small fan because the heat lingered. Becca said they didn't want to overload the circuit. Every request I made, no matter how small, was met with the same tone. You're lucky to be here. But lucky people don't sleep next to a plastic cabinet full of cleaning supplies. Lucky people don't bathe using wet wipes on nights when the house is locked. Lucky people aren't made to feel like pests. And yet, I smiled. I nodded. I made myself useful. When Becca's car wouldn't start one morning, I offered to jump it. When Caleb needed help reorganizing boxes in the garage, I volunteered. I kept my voice light, pleasant. I played the fool. Because nothing disarms a predator like prey that pretends not to notice it's been cornered. And every night I wrote in that notebook. Notes about the shed's electrical wiring, the back property line, tax exemptions for primary residences. I started Googling things I didn't even know I was looking for. Like what defines elder financial abuse? How gift money can be traced? Who handles property disputes in coastal counties? Then one night, while cleaning out an old wallet of Martin's, I found something I hadn't noticed before. Tucked deep inside the lining. A business card yellowed at the corners. Stanley Givens, attorney at law. Estate planning and civil litigation. On the back. Call me if things ever get complicated. That was the night I knew this was no longer just exile. It was a setup. But what Caleb and Becca didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask, was that I may have lived in the shadows for a few weeks, but I hadn't forgotten how to step into the light. I stared at that old business card like it was a lifeline and a trap at the same time. Stanley Givens, attorney at law, estate planning, civil litigation, and on the back in Martin's familiar scrawl, call me if things ever get complicated. Well, Martin, they got complicated. I didn't call him that night. I waited. Not out of fear. Out of calculation. I needed to get my facts in order first. No half-remembered details. No feelings dressed up as claims. If I was going to reach out, I wanted to speak in evidence. In terms that meant something. So I went to the library. It was the one place Becca and Caleb didn't monitor. Didn't care if I was gone for hours, probably preferred it. I rode the bus into town with a borrowed tote bag and walked 3 blocks past the coffee shops and boutiques until I reached the quiet beige building that still smelled like old paper and lemon oil. I sat at a computer and started digging. First, I pulled up the county assessor's office. Looked up the address of the Seabright Bay property. Just as I suspected, the deed was in Caleb and Becca's names only. No mention of me. No mention of room 217. My $280,000 contribution? Invisible. Then I searched zoning ordinances. The shed or guest suite, as they like to call it, was absolutely not up to code for residential use. It lacked a bathroom. No proper insulation. No separate utility hookups. No certificate of occupancy. In other words, I wasn't just disrespected. I was housed illegally. Next, I searched elder financial abuse. It brought up a state legal guide, dry clinical language, but it made something twist inside me when I read it. Elder financial exploitation involves the illegal or improper use of an elder's funds, property, or assets. Often includes manipulation through familial relationships or false pretenses. False pretenses. Room 217. They hadn't just changed their minds. They built a lie, sold it like a dream, and pocketed my money like it came out of a damn slot machine. I printed what I could. Tucked it into a manila folder. Then I sat outside under the magnolia tree next to the bus stop and dialed the number on the card. 2 rings. Then a deep, even voice. Givens. Mr. Givens, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I believe you knew my husband, Martin Travers. A pause. Yes. I remember Martin. Quiet man. Good heart. Always wore a tie even when it wasn't necessary. You must be Lucille. I am. What can I do for you? I took a breath. I think I've made a mistake. A costly one. And I need someone to help me figure out what to do next. We met 2 days later. Stanley was older now, late 70s maybe, but sharp. His suit was charcoal, crisp. His eyes behind square glasses were the color of wet stone. He still carried a briefcase. Still walked like a man who had watched liars squirm in courtrooms. I told him everything. Not all at once. I started with the basics, the money, the promise, the shed. Then I showed him the photos I'd secretly taken, the guest house, the typed rules, the locked door to the main house, the list of restrictions that kept me from using my own money's property. He didn't interrupt. Just nodded, scribbled notes, asked the occasional question. Did you sign anything? No written contract, I said. Just the wire transfer and the sale of my home. It was all verbal. He tapped his pen on the folder. Still useful. You have bank records. Texts? Plenty. Did they ever refer to your space as permanent? Yes. Room 217. They said it was mine. My home. Good, he said, almost under his breath. That's very good. He leaned back and folded his hands. Lucille, I've been practicing law for 45 years. And one thing I've learned is that betrayal from family hits harder, and is harder to prove, than from any stranger. But you have something rare. Proof of intent. And motive. You gifted them money under false promises. That's grounds for civil action. So, I can sue? He nodded. You can. And you'd likely win. But more than that, you'd set a precedent. These cases are underreported, especially among women like you. Retired. Widowed. Seen as easy marks. I swallowed. I don't just want compensation. Then what do you want? I thought about it. The rules. The shed. The silence. I want them to answer for it. Not just in court. I want them to feel it. To sit in what they did and know they're not as clever as they think. Stanley gave me a look I hadn't seen since Martin's funeral. One of respect. Not pity. I think we can manage that, he said. For the next few weeks I kept up appearances. I nodded at Caleb when we crossed paths. I complimented Becca's hideous wallpaper choices. I continued living in that shed like I was none the wiser. All the while Stanley and I were preparing. He pulled my bank records. He traced the deed. He filed the proper paperwork and logged every message I'd saved. I provided receipts, photos, my notebook full of dates and quotes and restrictions. We didn't tell them a thing. It became a quiet kind of joy watching Becca fret over a broken dishwasher while I jotted in my notebook, knowing I was 5 steps ahead. One morning I overheard Caleb on a business call. Yeah, my sister chipped in for the down payment, but she's just living out back. It's not like she owns anything. I smiled. That night I emailed Stanley. Let's proceed. We filed the initial fraud and elder exploitation complaint 3 days later. They hadn't noticed a thing. But they would soon. As I wasn't just taking them to court. I was reclaiming the home they tried to bury me in. And when it was over, they wouldn't just be broke. They'd be exposed. Revenge doesn't come with a starting gun. It begins quietly, like the soft hiss of a match before the fire catches. That was me. The match. The spark. The one they didn't see coming. Once Stanley filed the complaint, we met in person again. This time in a small diner off Route 5. It was empty except for a couple of truckers and a woman in scrubs eating soup at the counter. Stanley ordered black coffee and slid a manila envelope across the table like we were in a spy film. Inside, a draft of the lawsuit, including civil fraud, unjust enrichment, elder financial exploitation, and a formal demand for return of funds with damages. The paper itself didn't look like much, just ink and stapled edges, but holding it made me feel like I'd finally been handed a weapon. They don't know yet, Stanley said, tapping the corner of the folder. But they'll be served within the week. I nodded. Good. We'll do it formally at their residence. Mid-morning is best. Enough time for the neighbors to notice. You really think that matters? He smiled. Oh, it always matters. Especially to people who care more about appearances than relationships. That hit me harder than I expected. Becca's Instagram came to mind. All those filtered shots of their home, their kids, her workout selfies and fake gratitude captions. So blessed to live in our dream house. #family first, #beach life. I used to scroll past those photos with silent resentment. Now I save screenshots for court. We finished our coffee in silence. When we stood, Stanley put a hand on my shoulder. You understand, Lucille. Once this is public, it won't be clean. They'll try to intimidate you, manipulate you, even guilt you. I know, I said. But I've been invisible in my own life long enough. I'm not disappearing again. Back at the shed, I started preparing my exit. I kept it small, subtle. I removed personal photos. I packed my better clothes into a storage tote and slid it under the cot. I deleted myself from the Wi-Fi network and started checking out local listings for short-term rentals. Not because I couldn't stay, but because I didn't want to. That house, that yard, the one I helped pay for, it didn't deserve me anymore. A few nights before they were due to be served, Caleb asked me to join them for dinner. Becca had made some overcooked salmon and dressed it up with lemon wedges like that could disguise how dry it was. The kids were gone, a sleepover I think, and it was just the 3 of us sitting at their reclaimed wood dining table like we were some picture of domestic harmony. I took small bites. Nodded when Becca asked about my shed decor. Said nothing when Caleb joked about how quiet Lucille's been lately. Of course I was quiet. Silence is the only tool left to people who've been ignored too long. It's where power hides. That night I left a note in my notebook, just for me. They think they've won, which means I've already started winning. Stanley called the next morning. We've got a hearing date. When? Next month. Preliminary hearing. We'll get discovery soon. They'll have to open the books. I felt my stomach tighten. Not with fear. With focus. Time to show them what I've got, I said. But that wasn't enough. Justice was fine. Legal victory satisfying. But what I wanted wasn't just courtroom closure. I wanted poetic balance. A twist of the knife they never saw coming. So I made a second call. I remembered something Martin once told me, back when he was trying to get permits approved for our old garden shed. If the HOA thinks you built something without permission, they'll come for your blood faster than the IRS. Seabright Bay's HOA was strict. Their bylaws were a mile long. And that shed they stuffed me in? It violated more than half of them. I filled out an anonymous complaint online. Attached photos. Highlighted violations. Lack of permit, illegal habitation, improper electrical, no second egress. I hit submit. Then I did it again, this time to the county's property tax board. A tip. A few details. Nothing too formal. Just enough to raise suspicion. Let the bureaucracy do what it does best, dig. 2 days later, while Becca was out networking and Caleb was glued to his laptop in the den, I packed what little I had left. Clothes, toiletries, the notebook, Martin's shaving kit, and that manila envelope Stanley gave me. I left everything else. Let them keep the drawer liners, the plastic hangers, the insult. Before I left, I walked through the main house one last time. Kitchen. Still spotless. Living room. Still sterile. No signs of warmth. No trace of me. I stepped into the hallway, the one that was supposed to lead to room 217. The space they claimed was being renovated for me. It was empty. No drywall. No plumbing. Just insulation dust and exposed beams. They'd never planned to finish it. I left a note on the pillow of the guest room. Not the shed, the real one, the one they gave to Becca's mother last month when she visited. Room 217 was never for me. But the courtroom will be. Then I closed the door, walked out, and didn't look back. I moved into a quiet motel by the pier, weekly rate, clean sheets, and nobody asking questions. Stanley called to confirm the lawsuit had been served. Right on schedule. Apparently, Caleb tried to argue with the process server. Becca slammed the door. I imagined their faces when they read the accusations. Fraud. Exploitation. Constructive eviction. The terms must have looked like a foreign language, one they never thought they'd have to learn. But they were about to be fluent. A few hours later, I got a text from Caleb. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Call me." I didn't reply. Becca sent one too. "I can't believe you do this to your own family. We took you in." That one made me laugh. Took me in? No, they boxed me up and buried me alive. But now? I had a shovel. And I was digging up everything. The tide turned quietly, then all at once. I was standing in line at the Co-op Cafe, oatmeal, banana, and the best black coffee I'd tasted in months, when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar. I let it go to voicemail, but seconds later a text came through. "This is Holly from Seabright Bay HOA. We'd like to discuss an ongoing violation at redacted Seabright Way. Please call us at your earliest convenience." I read it twice, smiling into my coffee. They had no idea who tipped them off. But I knew what was coming. An hour later, Stanley called. "They've lawyered up," he said. "Becca and Caleb both hired the same firm out of Charleston. Defensive posture. They've also filed a response to the complaint, standard stuff. They're denying everything, of course." "Of course," I echoed. "They claim the funds were a gift. That there was never a written agreement. That they housed you out of charity." I nearly spit out my coffee. Charity? They stuck me in a tool shed. Stanley chuckled. Which, conveniently, may become a separate problem for them. The county's Building and Inspection Office has opened an investigation. That shed was never permitted. If it's deemed uninhabitable, they'll face fines. "And the HOA?" I asked. "Already sent them a cease-use notice. They have 2 weeks to stop using it as a living structure or face additional violations." It was happening. The quiet grip of their control was loosening. The walls were cracking. And I hadn't even set foot in court yet. I stayed quiet. Didn't respond to Caleb's texts. Blocked Becca's number after she sent me a 9-paragraph essay about betrayal and family loyalty. I didn't owe her my peace anymore. Or my silence. Instead, I went back to the Co-op Cafe. I joined a morning writers group. I met a woman named Brenda who ran a gardening blog and invited me to speak at a community event. I said yes. I wore my best blouse and talked about tomato rot and soil acidity to 20 strangers who listened like I mattered. And every night, I slept soundly for the first time in almost a year. Meanwhile, Caleb and Becca were drowning. Word got around. Seabright wasn't a big community. The HOA complaint spread fast. First among the neighborhood busybodies, then through a whisper chain of realtors, inspectors, and even the local PDA. Becca's name had weight in those circles. Until it didn't. She lost a minor listing deal with a boutique firm 2 towns over. A conflict of ethics, they called it. Caleb's consulting work took a hit too. One of his clients, a local entrepreneur who invested in family-run businesses, backed out of a proposal after seeing the lawsuit in public record. I didn't gloat. I observed, took notes, let the evidence pile up like snow. But I wasn't done. One morning while organizing documents with Stanley, I found an overlooked detail in the financial printout. A private account Caleb had set up just after receiving my wire transfer. The name on the account wasn't his. It was Becca's. Stanley raised an eyebrow. Interesting. What does that mean? It means they didn't just commingle your money into a shared purchase. He redirected it to her, possibly as a shield. If we prove that, it's a stronger case for intent to defraud. I sat back floored. They hadn't even used my money for the house. They'd funneled it, hidden it, spent it under her name. Everything about this so-called dream home was built on deception. I asked Stanley, "What happens if we win?" He didn't pause. "We reclaim the funds. Potential damages. Possibly in order to sell the home to repay you, depending on the court's discretion. But that's just the legal outcome." "And the human one?" He smiled faintly. "They lose control. You regain it." A week later, I moved into a small 1-bedroom condo across town. Nothing fancy, 2nd floor, basic appliances, quiet neighbors, but it was mine. Paid in full with the emergency fund Caleb didn't know I had. Martin's last gift to me. I furnished it with care. A bookshelf. A kitchen table I picked out alone. A reading chair near the window with a soft throw blanket. Every item deliberate. Every item chosen by me. No one else's rules. No one else's lock. On the first night I lit a candle, the same kind Becca had banned in the shed, and watched it flicker beside a bowl of lemons. The scent of vanilla and smoke made the air feel like home. Later I wrote a note in my new journal. Today I moved into a space built on dignity, not deceit. I'm not just surviving. I'm rewriting. 2 days before the hearing, Caleb called from an unknown number. I answered. Part of me wanted to hear what lie he'd settle on. "Lucille," he said, voice low, "you don't have to go through with this. We can work something out, just us. Family." There was that word again. Bent and broken by the mouths that used it for leverage. "I gave you everything I had," I said. "And you left me in a shed." "That's not fair," he snapped. "You offered to help. You didn't ask for a contract. That's not on me." "You're right," I said. "It's on me for trusting you." I hung up. Let the courtroom do the rest. They came for me at dawn. I heard the lawyers knock before I opened the door. 2 men in crisp suits, briefcases, papers rustling. One of them held a folder stamped with the court's seal. "A process server." I'd asked Stanley. "Make them serve me here, not there." I wanted to be ready. The summons named them both. Caleb and Becca. Filed in civil court. Claimed damages, fraud, breach of promise, elder abuse. My hands shook when I signed for the documents. But inside I felt steady. Resolute. When I read the complaint, I saw everything I'd gathered. Every photo, every rule, every denied request. Room 217. The deed. The shed. They were set to be held accountable. Word spread fast. By noon there was a knock from the paper boy. The local weekly newspaper had published a story. Elderly widow sues brother over fake housing deal. Promises of coastal room 217 now in court. Allegations of fraud in Seabright community. I held the front page in the motel lobby, hearing whispers behind me, feeling eyes on my back. I was nervous, but something inside me clicked. This was necessary. This was truth. The HOA notice followed days later. A stern letter delivered by certified mail. It said, "Unapproved guest structure. Violation of building code. Use of detached structure as dwelling is prohibited under Section 12 to 45. Cease its residential use within 10 days or face fines and liens." They didn't know I was already gone. That shed stood empty, the door locked, lights off. They didn't know I wasn't stepping back in. Next, the tax authorities' inquiry came. A demand for documents regarding the property's occupancy status. Was it being used as a rental? Had utilities been registered? Were inhabitants declared? The answers to those questions would force the truth into formal records. Caleb and Becca responded. They issued press statements. Becca posted on social media. Framed me as ungrateful, mentally fragile, confused. Caleb called me once. It doesn't have to be public, he said, voice tight. We can settle. I didn't reply. I knew what settle meant. Hush, fade, vanish. No public reckoning. No justice. As discovery began, Stanley laid out what they would have to turn over. Bank statements, deeds, communications. I felt like Sherlock Holmes poring over old maps. The ledger Caleb tried to hide by routing through Becca's account. The emails where Becca told friends she was relieved I wasn't upstairs. The texts where Caleb joked that I wouldn't complain if I had beach bugs instead of wall plugs. Stanley subpoenaed their records. The HOA's building permits. The inspector's logs. And Becca's real estate licensing history, which showed no record of approving guest houses like that. In court, the preliminary hearing was scheduled in 2 weeks. I dressed in a navy blazer that had been Martin's. It made me feel armored. That morning I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom. The wood smell, cold tile, echoing voices. Becca's lawyer slinked past me. Caleb's eyes didn't meet mine. No apology. No regret. The judge called the hearing. Stanley spoke first. He laid out evidence of false promises, undocumented agreements, financial transfers, elder abuse laws. He explained how the gift had been coerced by misleading promises. How the deed never included me. How secrecy was part of the deceit. Their attorney argued the opposite, that I had acted voluntarily, that there were no promises in writing, that the shed was adequate and that I accepted it, that I had trusted them, that trust is not a contract. Stanley crossed to me afterward. How are you? He asked quietly. Tired, I said. But clear. He nodded. We're going to fight they said. He said. They'll try to muddy the waters. But facts, they don't lie. Outside the courthouse, the sun was harsh. I squinted. The ocean breeze smelled salty. I lit a cigarette, first one in years. Inhale. Exhale. Felt like I was exhaling years of silence. The storm had come. The courtroom, the papers, the TV crews, everything I feared. But also everything I needed. Over the next few days, the fallout grew. Becca was suspended from one of her smaller real estate boards pending investigation. Listings removed. Clients questioning her credibility. Caleb's financial consultant gig put on hold when an investor demanded proof that he owned the property legitimately. The HOA meetings buzzed, neighbors coming forward, saying they never saw a permit for that guest suite. Some were angry, others ashamed for having admired their home envy. And through it all I stayed calm. I kept my apartment clean. I attended my writer's group. I read old garden journals. I planted seedlings in a small pot on the balcony so I could watch green grow. The courtroom doors loomed on that hearing day, heavy stained wood. I walked in not as a betrayed sister, not as a lonely widow, but as someone claiming her right. When Judge Meyer stepped up, I looked at him, then at the gallery. A few reporters, some neighbors, a couple of strangers who'd come out of curiosity, and then Becca, Caleb, and their lawyer. In short order, the judge acknowledged the standing of the complaint, granted my motion to proceed, ordered temporary restraining orders against them using the guest structure as a residence, froze some accounts tied to the disputed bank records, gave me possession of documentation of deeds and finances, and set a full trial date. All that in about an hour. Driving back, I let tears fall. Not of grief, not of shame, but relief. Relief that someone had heard what I said, that someone acknowledged what felt like being invisible. They still had time to fight. I still had to testify. But the tides had changed. Penalty, exposure, consequence. Room 217, or what they made of it, was unraveling in the open. And for the first time in months, I felt like the world might see me again. Not as a guest, but as someone who belonged. It's strange how quickly a house can become someone else's problem. The listing went up the week after the court froze part of Caleb and Becca's accounts. A photo carousel of whitewashed walls, throw pillows, beach light, staged to erase the story behind it. Coastal charm, the description read. Ideal for entertaining. They didn't mention the lawsuit, or the cease-use order from the HO, or the shed that used to be my home, now demolished and gone. It sat on the market for months. Eventually, the price dropped enough that even the neighbors noticed. A few brave ones even reached out. One sent a message through a mutual friend. I didn't know. I wish I had. That made me pause. Because it was true they didn't know. They just saw what Caleb and Becca wanted them to. A picture-perfect family with good hair and better filters. But now the cracks were showing. And no filter could hide it. I didn't go back to gloat. I went because I needed to see it fall. Not the house but the illusion. The porch was bare. No lights. The fence paint chipped. Becca's hydrangeas had withered. The mailbox hung crooked. All the little signs that tell you when people stop caring about appearances. Or maybe when they just can't afford to keep up the lie. They weren't home when I walked by. But that was fine. I wasn't there for confrontation. Just closure. My condo, meanwhile, had started to feel like mine in the deepest sense of the word. I picked out a new reading chair. A velvet one in forest green. Hung a photograph of the mountains Martin once loved. The kitchen smelled like basil and lemon most days. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I finally had the freedom to live without shame. Every Sunday I hosted a small dinner. Sometimes it was just me and Brenda from the writing group. Other times, a neighbor from the co-op building joined. We swapped stories, poured wine, and sometimes sat in silence, which felt like the kindest thing of all. That shed taught me survival. This place taught me joy. One Thursday afternoon, Stanley called. They've agreed to comply with the court order. Proceeds from the house sale will be held in escrow until judgment. They want to avoid trial if possible. Let them squirm a little longer, I said. He chuckled. They offered a settlement. I know. I got the letter. And I burned it. Good, he said, then paused. Lucille, if this goes the distance, you'll win. But it'll be loud. I'm not afraid of loud anymore. A few days later, I ran into an old friend from the hospital, a nurse I'd mentored back when my hair was still brown and my back still strong. She hugged me tight and said, "You look lighter." I told her, "I finally am." We sat by the pier watching kids toss bread to gulls and she asked, "Do you ever wish you hadn't trusted him?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said. "I wish he'd been someone worth trusting. But I don't regret having the heart to believe in him." She nodded. And now I'm done writing people into chapters they never deserved to be in. When I got home that evening, I passed my basil plant. Still stubborn, still thriving, and opened my notebook one last time. The page was blank. I wrote, "The house is for sale. The truth is public. And I am free." Then I closed the cover for good. The courthouse smelled like old carpet and nervous sweat. I stood near the back, next to Stanley, watching the final judgment unfold without ceremony. Caleb didn't look at me. Becca wore her sunglasses indoors, even though the room was lit by flickering fluorescents. Their lawyer did the talking. Mine didn't have to say much. The evidence had spoken weeks ago. The judge was clear. His words came down like slow thunder. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Full reimbursement of $280,000 is ordered, with an additional $55,000 in damages for emotional distress and fraudulent misrepresentation. Property is to be sold with 25% of proceeds publicly donated to a qualified elder abuse foundation of the plaintiff's choosing. Becca gasped. Caleb clenched his jaw. I didn't flinch. I had come into that courtroom once thinking I'd feel triumphant when this moment arrived. But as the words sank in, all I felt was peace. Not glee. Not bitterness. Just the quiet certainty that I'd done the right thing. Not just for myself, but for every person who's ever been dismissed with a wave and a just be grateful. Let them try that line now. The local paper ran a follow-up story the next week. Coastal family ordered to repay elderly relative in housing fraud case. Funds to support local elder justice foundation. From promised room to courtroom, Lucille Travers wins public victory. I clipped it out and pinned it to the corkboard in my kitchen, right next to the basil plant and a picture of Martin smiling with a fishing rod. The donations were made in full by court order and very, very publicly. Caleb and Becca were photographed handing over the oversized check to the foundation. No smiles, no captions. Just stiff bodies and legal obligation. The photo ran in 3 different local papers. I didn't attend the event, but I heard from a friend who did that Becca's hands trembled when she handed over the check. Not from remorse, from humiliation. She always did hate losing face. When I called Stanley to thank him, he said, "You didn't just win in court, Lucille. You changed the terms." "What do you mean?" "You didn't just reclaim money. You reclaimed space, voice, history. They tried to make you a footnote. You turned the whole damn book around." That stuck with me, because for a long time I'd felt erased, not just from their house, but from the life I'd built for others. Years of mothering a brother, of caretaking, of sacrificing, of shrinking to fit into someone else's comfort zone. Now, I fit just fine in my own. On the day the house officially closed, I walked by one last time. New owners had moved in, a couple in their late 30s with 2 little girls and a golden retriever. They'd repainted the shutters, ripped up the wilted hydrangeas. The shed was gone. The yard was open again. As I passed the fence, the woman stepped out. "You lived here before, didn't you?" she asked. "In a way," I said. She smiled kindly. "It's a lovely space. We're going to make it a real home." I smiled back, this time meaning it. "Good. Take care of it." Later that week, I had brunch with a friend at the library cafe. Someone new at the table asked about the court case. They'd read the article, recognized my name. "What made you fight it?" they asked. "Most people just let family stuff slide." I took a slow sip of my coffee and set the cup down. "They gave me a key to a shed," I said. "I gave them a key to their own undoing." The table went quiet. Then someone chuckled. Another clapped softly. Someone else raised their glass. "To room 217, they toasted. "No," I said, raising mine too. "To the people who build their own rooms, with locks on the inside." I no longer check their social media. I don't care where they live now. I don't care who believes their version of events. What I care about is this: that the next time someone like me is handed a lie wrapped in lace and called lucky, she remembers this story. And maybe, just maybe, it gives her the courage to write her own ending. Because mine ends here, in sunlight, in quiet, in truth. Not with a bang, but with a verdict. And a new beginning.